Good Erev Shabbos. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Friday afternoon. Shabbos can't arrive soon enough. We all need Shabbos. The world needs Shabbos now. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Friday? Stay down. Stay down. Yehudit in South Carolina. Paula is here for Friday. Gordo from Scotland. Always great to see you on Fridays, Gordo. Paula says Shabbat Shalom. Joey in the Inland Empire. Shandor in the Bronx. Guy in Ohio. Karen in Northern California. Ella's in the house. Marjorie in Georgia. Spencer in Connecticut. Welcome, everybody. Today's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by Eric and Julie Weissman, our good friends, in honor of Michael Weissman's 76th birthday, which is today. May you enjoy your family, Michael, to 120, and may they enjoy you. May your wisdom be transmitted to them, and they transmit it to the next generation. And Eric and Julie, thank you so much for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. May you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. Okay, very interesting daf today. Also, Duncan in Mobile, Alabama. I've been in Mobile. Great town. I want to go back. Okay, let's go. So our daf today is page 106 here in Tractate Bava Kamma, 21st volume of the Talmud. Continuing our discussion of Mishnah number 5 here in chapter 9. I was actually looking at the calendar, looking ahead a little bit. So I believe that Bava Metzia, Tractate Bava Metzia, begins on March 1st. We are indeed on the schedule, at least for now, the Daf Yomi schedule around the world. And so that means we should be making a siyum the previous day. And right, it's 2024, a leap year, so that must be February 29th. And, I shared this post yesterday telling my story, how I became accidental Talmudist. And it's really going bonkers on Instagram, which is wonderful, particularly because so many people have said in the comments that they're inspired and they want to start learning, including some people who might be joining our class. And somebody said, when is a good time to start? So if you've got a friend who's thought about doing Daf Yomi, put it off, I don't know, maybe I'll start in the next cycle. So Bava Metzia, we're right in the middle. I mean, we've talked about this. We're past the halfway point, but, somewhat in the middle. We're about, I think today is 1504, the 1504th page of 2711. But Bava Metzia, our next tractate, is one of those places where learning actually traditionally begins in many yeshivas. People start with tractate Bava Metzia, and the very famous law of two people are each holding a talus, right? And saying, one says it's mine and the other says it's mine. And what are we going to do when two people claim that this garment is theirs? It's a great place to jump in to Daf Yomi. As I said to someone in the comments, look, it's going to be a little confusing wherever we are when you first begin. So it's always good to just jump in. But really, the opening of Bava Metzia is a wonderful place to jump in. So if you know anybody who's been thinking about starting to learn, great time. Okay. So here, our Mishnah number 5 here in chapter 9. So we've been talking, remember, the robber who steals and then swears a false oath that he stole, and then he repents that he both stole and not only lied about it, but swore that he hadn't done it when in fact he had. So to make his atonement, he has to return what he took, add the fifth, and the sages obligated him to make every effort possible to personally return what he stole. So now we've been talking a little bit about other situations that are related. First, we did some digressions because of dilemmas that Rava raised. But now that we're also going to be talking about oaths and swearing an oath, a shavua, and that's going to come up more today because there's several situations where one swears an oath. Actually, I'll just read this right at the outset. All oaths, so this is a halacha, right? This is where the halacha ended up after the discussions here and in other places in the Talmud. So all oaths that are mandated by Torah law are taken by the one against whom a claim has been lodged in order to exempt himself from payment, right? In other words, there is not sufficient evidence to extract the money from the one against whom a claim is made. It's, he said, she said, he said, she said, etc. And so, but the evidence seems to be strong enough by the one who claims that the money should be his against the one who is holding the money, that the one who's holding the money is gonna, has the option to swear an oath that he doesn't owe that money. And with that, his obligation is going to be terminated. Now, you can see that this operates in a system of pious people, right? Because, if you're talking about, sadly, the average person in modern society who just doesn't care about what their word means and, what their word means before God Almighty, and would just say anything to get out of having to pay money, this is not going to work so well in such a society. But if we think about a society of God-fearing people, it's very, very strong, to swear before God and your community that you don't owe something, and then to be excused by it. If you swear falsely, you're going to bear that sin into the future. What's interesting about it is sometimes people don't know. Right? They're not sure. They don't remember, taking a deposit or stealing something or all these different situations. And rather than take an oath that might be false, they would rather pay. Right? Now that's how this works in a God-fearing society. So the sages, generally, right, one makes a claim and the one who would have the money taken from him swears, no, I don't know, and then it ends, right? That's by Torah law. Now, the sages instituted additional oaths, right? So the first situation was deraisa, biblical oath, and now we have derabanan, right? So additional oaths that were instituted by rabbinic decree. So the sages instituted additional oaths, some of which are taken by the plaintiff to enable him to collect the debt that he claims he is owed. And the circumstances in which these oaths are taken include cases of employees who claim that they are owed wages, one who claims to have been robbed, but the thief does not know what he stole, a victim of physical assault, storekeepers with record books, and cases where the one against whom a claim has been lodged is considered suspect with regard to the concern that he may take a false oath. Somebody who has a record in the past of swearing falsely, well, we're not going to let him get off the hook by swearing that he doesn't owe money because we have reason to suspect that he might swear falsely. So there we might transfer the burden of swearing to the plaintiff, the one who wants to extract the money, and say, well, we have no reason to suspect that you would swear falsely. Swear that you indeed are owed this money, and that might be enough to extract it from the defendant. Okay. And then also these kinds of oaths will appertain in cases of a deposit, right? Somebody accepted or took on the task of guarding some property, being a bailee, whether paid bailee or unpaid bailee. One who falsely denies another's monetary claim, right? For example, that he received a deposit, and then he says, I never received a deposit. And then he swears falsely. And how do we know it was false? Because it's proven, perhaps by witnesses. So one who falsely denies another's monetary claim and takes multiple oaths to that effect is liable to bring a separate guilt offering for each false oath, whether he took the oaths of his own accord or because the claimant had him do so, and whether or not the oath was taken in court. And the reason he is liable for a separate offering for each false oath is that he admitted his liability after any individual denial. I'm sorry, let me read that again. The reason he is liable for a separate offering for each false oath is that had he admitted his liability after any individual denial, he would thereby have been required to pay. Therefore, each denial was a false oath that has a potential result of exempting him from monetary payment. It is thus monetarily significant in its own right. Right? Each time he swore had a monetary consequence, and that's why he becomes liable to bring a guilt offering for each one of those. Okay, so with those laws in mind, let's get into today's page. We picked this up a few paragraphs from the top on 106a. Having mentioned Rav's ruling, the Gemara addresses the matter itself. Rav Huna says that if one party said, I have 100 dinars in your possession, I deposited or I lended to you 100 dinars, and the other party says, you do not have any money in my possession, and the latter takes an oath to that effect, and later witnesses came and testified that his oath was false, he is exempt, as it is stated, and the owner thereof shall accept it, and he shall not make restitution. Right? Swearing the oath is enough. He gets off the hook. Teaching that once the owner received an oath, the one who took the oath no longer pays monetary restitution. And the fact is, right, he doesn't have to pay monetary restitution because he took that oath. But if witnesses came and proved that it was a false oath, it's not over. That was the opinion of Rav, as brought down by Rav Huna, but the law is not in accordance with Rav in this matter. If witnesses prove that it was a false oath, the money will be extracted. And Rav has said that Rav's statement is reasonable in the case of one who denies having taken a loan, which is intended for expenditure. Since the money is no longer in his possession, the Torah exempts him from monetary restitution once he takes an oath. But in the case of one who denies having accepted a deposit, it remains in the owner's possession and it must be returned intact. And it is not considered to be monetary restitution. It's not paying back something that you borrowed and then spent, and now you have to go raise new money to pay it back. If you actually have the money in your possession and you swore falsely and then it's proven, you're going to have to give that back, even according to Rav. And Rava continues, but by God, Rav said his statement, even in the case of one who denies having accepted a deposit, as when this verse exempting him from paying is written, it is written in the case of one who denies having accepted a deposit. So you can see what Rav's point was. Well, the Torah says if you swear about having received a deposit, okay, then you don't have to pay it back because it doesn't exist. And what Rav is not taking into account is when witnesses come and show that it was a false oath, and the law is not according to Rav, it's going to be according to Rav Nachman, and we follow Rav Nachman, even against Rav, in cases of monetary law. The Gemara relates that Rav Nachman was sitting and saying this law. So Rav Achabar ben Yumi raised an objection to Rav Nachman from that which is taught in a Mishna, page 108b. If the owner asked the bailee, where is my deposit? And the bailee said to him, it is lost. And the owner said, I administer an oath to you, meaning you swear an oath to me that it is lost, or I want the money. And the bailee said, Amen, meaning he has taken an oath, right? I administered you an oath, Amen. It's like he took an oath, thereby accepting the oath. And the witnesses come and testify about the bailee that he consumed the deposit, then he must pay the principal. Swearing the false oath, when it's shown that it was false, he has to cough up the money. The matter is not over, per Rav Nachman. If he admitted of his own accord that he had taken a false oath, then he must pay the principal and an additional 1/5. Right? If he admits that he swore a false oath, the principal plus 1/5. If he's caught with the false oath, different matter. So if he admits it of his own accord without being caught, then it's the principal plus 1/5 plus the guilt offering. He's off the hook. If he's caught by witnesses, sounds like he just makes restitution and he doesn't have this ability to pay the extra 1/5 and bring a guilt offering and have made an atonement. there's possible to atone for big sins, but he's going to have to work very hard at it. That mechanism is not available to him. Rav Nachman said to him, with what are we dealing here? We are dealing with a case where one takes an oath outside of court, which does not exempt him from paying restitution. Rav Acha bar ben Yumi said to him, if so, the latter clause of the Mishna, which said, if the owner asked the bailee, where is my deposit? And the bailee said to him, it was stolen. And the owner said, I administer an oath to you. And the bailee said, Amen, thereby accepting the oath. And the witnesses come and testify about the bailee that he stole it. So he must pay the payment of double the principal. Why double? Why would he pay double? Because the false oath that he swore was that a thief had come and taken it from him. So now his false oath is going to put him in the place of a thief, and a thief makes double payment. We've talked about before the difference between a thief and a robber. A thief is sneaky, a robber is brazen, and the thief is worse. Because the thief is only afraid of other humans, but not afraid of God, right? The robber says, okay, well, I'm just a bad person. I'm a dishonest person, and I don't care who knows it, whether God knows it or the other people know it. The thief thinks that, he's going to get away with it because other people aren't looking and doesn't care that God sees everything. So that's why the thief is considered worse. If this one who claimed that it was stolen from him, if he admitted of his own accord that he had taken a false oath that it was stolen from him, then he pays the principal plus 1/5 and brings a guilt offering. And if it enters your mind that this oath was taken outside of court, is there an obligation of double payment in such a circumstance? And Rav Nachman said to him, I am able to answer you by saying that the first clause of the Mishna is referring to one who took an oath outside of court, and the latter clause of the Mishna is referring to one who took an oath in court. But we will not answer you with a forced answer. Instead, I will explain it in this manner. Both this clause and that clause are referring to an oath taken in court, and it is not difficult. Here, the ruling of the first clause is with regard to one who leaped to take an oath as soon as the other litigant stated his claim, even though the court had not yet required him to do so, which is not considered a full-fledged oath. And there, the ruling of the latter clause is with regard to one who did not leap, but took an oath only when required by the court. So Rami Bar Kamma said to Rav Nachman, after all, you do not hold in accordance with the statement of Rav. Why are you pledging yourself to explain this statement of Rav so that it not be contradicted by the Mishnah? And Rav Nachman said to him, I said this not to justify Rav's ruling, but to clarify the statement of Rav, as Rav would explain the Mishnah in this manner as I did. Now this is something the sages will often do, and we could really learn a lesson from that. You don't have to agree with another person in order to be able to state their position clearly, as they would say. Right? We've talked about this in the past. Not only when you're disputing with another person or when you're advocating for a position, how important it is to be able to state clearly and without prejudice the argument that is in opposition to yours. If you want to convince somebody of anything, somebody who disagrees with you, the first thing you better do is listen to them closely and be able to state their position in a way that they would agree, yes, that's my position. Most people in our society, when they talk about what the other side says, they express it with sarcasm, dismissively, and not in such a way that the other side would agree. Yeah, that's what I said, right? When you're being dismissive and sarcastic, no one would agree with you that you've captured their position accurately. So if you show people that you've listened to them and you've heard them, and prove that by stating their position in a way that they would agree that's their position, now you've opened the door to where they will listen to you. Maybe you'll be able to win the argument. Maybe you'll convince them of something they hadn't thought of before. Maybe not. But if you don't do this, it's certainly impossible. Now, this principle also applies when you're bringing down arguments, not with the person who disagrees with you, but with some third party. And you say to him, well, listen, I hold like this. This is what I believe. There is a different belief. And again, Don't be dismissive of that other belief. Let this person make up their mind by presenting the best version of your belief and the people who disagree so that this one can make up his or her mind. And that's what Rav Nachman was doing. So the Gemara asks, but Rav quoted a verse, so how could Rav Nachman not agree with his statement? And the sages said in response, this verse was not written to teach the ruling of Rav. Rather, it comes to teach the law that all those discussed in the Torah who are required to take oaths and do not pay, as the verse should be interpreted as follows, and the owner thereof shall accept it, and he shall not make restitution. Exodus 22:10, teaching that one who has the obligation to pay is the one who takes an oath and not the one demanding payment, right? So in the written Torah, right, deraisa, what we see is that the Torah has stipulated that, for example, when you deposit money with someone and then you come later to collect it, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So then if he indeed owes it to you, as you claim that he does, then the one seeking to extract money would administer the oath, right? Say, well, then swear to me that you don't owe me that money. And if he indeed swears, then the matter is over. In the absence of witnesses coming after and proving that the oath was false. But if we can't prove that it was a false oath, the matter has ended when he takes that oath. Now, Rav Hamnuna raises an objection to Rav's statement from a different Mishna, Tractate Shavuos 36b, which states, if an owner requested the return of his deposit, and the purported bailee denied having received it, and the owner administered an oath to the bailee about the deposit 5 times, whether before the court or not before the court, and the bailee denied the claim each time, he is liable for each and every one of the oaths and must pay the additional 1/5 payment and bring a guilt offering for each of the false oaths. And we read at the top of class why that halacha is that he owes a penalty and a guilt offering for each time he swears falsely, because each time has monetary consequences since he doesn't have to pay. And Rabbi Shimon says, what is the reason? Since he is able to retract and admit after each oath, at which point he would be liable to pay. Therefore, each subsequent false oath is a denial of that liability. And it can be seen from this Mishnah that one who admits liability after taking a false oath is liable to pay, counter to the statement of Rav, right, who said that the matter is over even if witnesses come. But here we learn, no, there is a liability to pay. And here you cannot say that the Mishna Shavuos is referring to a case where the bailee leaped to volunteer his oath, because it teaches explicitly that the owner administered an oath to the bailee about the deposit. And you cannot say that the Mishna Shavuos is referring to a case where the bailee took his oath outside of court, because it teaches explicitly that the law applies whether the oath was taken before the court or not before the court. So the Gemara explains, Rav Hamnuna, raised the objection and he resolved it. The Tana teaches disjunctively, i.e. the rulings of the Mishnah are stated with regard to different circumstances. So where it teaches that the owner administered an oath to the bailee about the deposit, that is referring to outside of court. And when it discusses an oath taken before the court, it is referring to a case where the bailee leaped and volunteered his oath, meaning before the plaintiff forced him to. Therefore, the Mishnah does not discuss the case with regard to which Rav issued his ruling, where the bailee was forced to take an oath before the court. Rava raises an objection to Rav's statement from a baraisa. In the case of a homeowner acting as a bailee who falsely claimed with regard to a deposit that a thief stole it, right? So you came to me and said, Sal, would you watch, my mom's antique silver? I'm going on a trip. It's very valuable to me. So could I just leave this at your house since my house is going to be empty for, an extended period of time? I say, sure, no problem. I put it in a drawer. You come back 6 months later. Okay, I'm going to take my mom's silver now. And I'm like, oh, let's look around. Oh my gosh, it's gone. It must have been stolen. A thief must have come in my house and taken it. and now you're really distressed. You don't know whether to trust me or not. What else was robbed, Sal? Oh, nothing. I guess they came in and just took that. That sounds suspicious to you. So maybe now you administer an oath to me and make me swear that this was stolen from me and not that I am keeping it for myself. God forbid, right? So Rava raises an objection in the case of a homeowner acting as a bailee who falsely claimed with regard to a deposit that a thief stole it, and then he takes an oath to that effect, and then he regrets it, and he admits that he was lying, and that in fact he took the item himself. Okay, so he admitted it. And witnesses came and testified that the bailee himself indeed took the item. So now we have two after the swearing incidents. One is the guy admits it. I admit it in this example. And witnesses come. So presumably it's going to matter whether witnesses come before he admits it or after. Let's see. And witnesses came and testified that the bailee himself indeed took the item. Then, if he admitted his guilt before the witnesses came and testified, he pays the principal value of the item and the additional 1/5, and he must also bring a guilt offering, and then he's made atonement. But if he admitted his guilt after the witnesses came and testified, he pays the double payment of a thief, since he tried to act as a thief by swearing that a thief took it so that he himself could keep it. But if he admitted his guilt after the witnesses came and testified, he pays the double payment and he brings a guilt offering. And this Baraisa rules that one who takes an oath is not exempt from payment, counter to the statement of Rav. And here in this Baraisa, you cannot say that it is referring to an oath taken outside of court or that he leaped and volunteered his oath, because double payment is taught in the Baraisa, and one is obligated to pay double payment only when he is accused, only when the accused has an oath administered to him before the court. So the Gemara cites a new version of Rava's statement. So rather, Rava said, in any case where one admits to having taken a false oath, there is no difference whether one falsely states the claim that the deposit was lost, and no difference if he states the claim that the thief stole the deposit. And as well, in these cases, Rav did not say that taking an oath exempts the bailee from restitution, because it is written in the Torah portion discussing a false oath taken with regard to a deposit, and they shall confess the sin that they performed, and he shall return the principal for his guilt, and he shall add to it the 1/5, and he gives it to the one with regard to whom he is guilty. Numbers 5:7, teaching that anyone who admits to a false oath concerning a deposit is required to pay the principal and the additional 1/5 payment. So this would seem to indicate that whether you claimed it was stolen from you or whether you claimed it was lost, in either case falsely, doesn't change what the penalty is. Since you admit it, it's going to be that restore the principal at 1/5. So the Gemara continues this new version of Rava's statement. Additionally, in a case where one falsely claims that a thief stole the deposit and takes a note to that effect, and then witnesses come and say that he has stolen it, as well, Rav did not say that taking an oath exempts the bailee from restitution, because double payment is written in the Torah. And when he says that taking an oath exempts the bailee from restitution, it is in a case where one falsely states the claim that the deposit was lost, and he takes a note to that effect, and he did not admit it, and then witnesses come and testify that he had stolen it. So the Gemara relates that Rav Gamda went and said that halacha, that law, before Rav Ashi. And Rav Ashi said to him, well, now consider. And even Rav Hamnuna, who was Rav's student and knew that Rav says that one who takes a false oath is exempt from paying restitution, even in a case where he admitted it. And the law is not like that, but that's what Rav said. And Rav Hamnuna therefore challenged him from a Mishna that teaches that one is not exempt in a case where he admitted it. And you say that Rav did not say this halacha, did not say this law, in a case where one admitted that he took a false oath? Presumably Rav Hamnuna, as Rav's student, was aware of the scope of his teacher's ruling. How then can you limit it as being narrower than Rav Hamnuna's interpretation? How could you say that you know what Rav said better than Rav Hamnuna, who was Rav's student? Rav Acha, the elder, said to Rav Ashi, Rav Hamnuna did not raise a difficulty against Rav with regard to the case of one admitting to having taken a false oath, rather with regard to the case where witnesses came after he took the oath. And this is what was difficult for him. Now 106b. Granted, if you say that when one takes a false oath and then witnesses come, he is liable to pay, and that is why we hold him liable for a guilt offering for the final oath, since he can still retract and admit his liability and incur an obligation to pay. Consequently, the fact that he took another false oath constitutes an additional false denial of his monetary liability. But if you say, as Rav did, that even when witnesses come, he is exempt from paying, then the Mishna's ruling is difficult, is there any similar case where if witnesses come and testify with regard to it, he would be exempt, and yet we would stand and obligate him to bring a guilt offering for a later oath for no reason other than since he can still retract and admit his liability? As of now, in any event, he has not admitted to any liability, and he has no extant debt, and any further oaths that he takes are not denials of monetary liability. It follows then that Rav's explanation of Rav's opinion cannot be undermined by Rav Hamnuna's challenge. Not by Rav Hamnuna's challenge, but it was undermined by Rav Nachman's statement. Now here's a note worth hearing from Rav Steinsaltz. So the mere fact that he repeated his false oath is not sufficient to render him liable to bring another offering, as one oath does not take effect when another oath is already in effect. The obligation resulting from the second oath must be due to the fact that it also served the legal function of denying a monetary claim. Since an admission would have been sufficient for the court to require him to pay, each successive oath is considered, according to this opinion, a new denial of a monetary claim, not the same one. So the Ravad notes that the reason that the Gemara specifies his retraction and not witness testimony as the potential cause for his obligation is because only through a retraction would he be liable to bring an offering and pay the additional fifth as well. Okay, new subject. The Gemara cites another ruling concerning the topic of a bailee, right, a custodian of a deposit, who claims that a deposit in his possession was stolen. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan says, one who falsely states the claim with regard to a deposit that a thief stole it, and it becomes clear that he stole it himself, pays double payment. And if he slaughtered or sold a sheep or an ox, he must pay the fourfold or the fivefold payment. And that is the law. Now, he explains his ruling by means of a comparison. Since a thief pays double payment, and one who falsely states the claim that a thief stole the deposit from him also pays double payment, it follows that just as a thief who ordinarily pays double payment, and if he slaughtered or sold an animal, he pays the fourfold or fivefold payment, so too, one who falsely states the claim that a thief stole a deposit, who ordinarily pays double payment, if he slaughtered or sold the animal, he also received, that he slaughtered or sold the animal that he received as a deposit, also pays the fourfold or fivefold payment. And this comparison is valid, and that is the halacha. So the Gemara asks, what is notable about the law of a thief? It is notable in that he pays double payment even without having taken a false oath. Remember, the robber is only going to pay a penalty if he swears a false oath and then he retracts, he admits that he stole and retracts the false oath. Then he pays the fifth, makes restitution, and is liable to bring a guilt offering. That law does not apply to the thief. The thief who is caught has to pay the double payment. If he admits that he stole without the witnesses coming, then he just makes restitution, right? He doesn't have to pay an additional fifth. And the robber who admits without having taken a false oath just has to make restitution, right? But the fifth, etc., is for a robber, not for a thief. Right, so that's the law of the thief. Now the sages say in response, well, I'm sorry. So what is notable about the law of the thief? It is notable that he pays double payment without having taken a false oath. Will you say that this stringency should apply with regard to one who falsely states the claim that a thief stole a deposit from him, who pays double payment only upon taking a false oath? Therefore, one cannot derive from the obligation of a thief to pay the fourfold or fivefold payment in the case of a thief who stole an animal, a sheep or an ox, and then slaughtered or sold it, that he has the obligation to make a fourfold or fivefold payment. It's not necessarily so that we would extend the fourfold or fivefold payment for an animal to the case of a bailee who falsely swears that a thief stole the animal from him, and then he slaughters or sells it, right? He didn't steal the animal in the first place. He acquired it legally. It was deposited with him. So this fourfold or fivefold payment may or may not apply to him. We've said that it does, but we haven't gotten there yet in deriving this law. Now the sages say in response, Rabbi Yochanan did not base his ruling on a logical inference. Rather, it is a derivation based upon a juxtaposition. As the verse is discussing a thief and one who falsely states the claim that a deposit was stolen by a thief, these verses are juxtaposed in the Torah, one after the other. And one cannot refute through analysis a derivation based upon juxtaposition. Why? The reason for this is that the laws derived from a juxtaposition are considered to be explicitly stated in the Torah, and therefore no analysis can refute them. A derivation by analogy or by verbal analogy, by a kal v'chomer, etc., other methods of exegesis can be refuted unless it's the case of a verbal analogy which is based on a word which is superfluous in both contexts where we are making the connection, two different laws that both have the same word in them, and that same word is superfluous in both contexts. That's going to be a very solid derivation for a particular law. But when we say that, these two laws are going to have a similar outcome because the Torah located them one right next to the other, that is a very solid basis, and we're not going to undo it because some logical derivation would seem to contradict the juxtaposition. The juxtaposition is stronger. Now the Gemara asks, this works out well according to the one who says that one verse is stated with regard to a thief, and one verse is stated with regard to one who falsely states the claim that a thief stole the deposit. According to him, there is a juxtaposition, and one can well derive the one from the other. But according to the one who says that both this verse, if the thief shall be found, he shall pay double, Exodus 22:6, and the next verse, if the thief shall not be found, Exodus 22:7, are referring to both verses are referring to one who falsely states the claim that a thief stole the deposit, and neither verse is actually referring to the thief, then what is there to say? And the sages answer, Rabbi Yochanan's ruling is derived from an amplification indicated by the verse not employing the term thief, ganav, and instead employing the expanded term the thief, haganav. So this teaches that the law of the fourfold and fivefold payment applies to one who falsely states the claim that the deposit was stolen as well. And Rabbi Chia bar Abba raised an objection to this statement of Rabbi Yochanan from a Baraisa. In a scenario where one said to an unpaid bailee, "Where is my ox?" And then the bailee responded, "It was stolen." Unpaid bailee, right? Unpaid bailee not liable for theft in the same way that a paid bailee would be. He says, "Where's my ox?" And the bailee responded, "It was stolen." And the owner said, "I administer an oath to you." And the bailee said, "Amen." And then witnesses come and testify about the bailee that he ate the ox. So he pays the double payment. But here the law is that it is impossible to eat even an olive bulk of meat without slaughtering the animal first. So obviously he didn't eat meat from a live animal, right? So we're going to assume that the animal was slaughtered and it was a kosher slaughter. And if you slaughter an animal that you stole, and it's an ox, then the fivefold penalty payment kicks in. But here the law is that it is impossible to eat even an olive bulk of meat without slaughtering the animal first, indicating that it must have been slaughtered. And nevertheless, it teaches that he pays double payment. It can be inferred that double payment, yes, he pays, the one who claimed that it was stolen from him. But the fourfold or fivefold payment, no, he does not pay. Rabbi Yochanan answers, with what are we dealing here? We're dealing with a case where he ate it as an unslaughtered animal carcass. Since it was not killed according to the laws of ritual slaughter, the thief does not pay the fourfold or fivefold payment. When we say that a thief who steals a sheep or an ox and then he either sells or slaughters it, slaughter means slaughter, meaning shechting, kosher slaughter, right? If he doesn't do that, he doesn't render it permissible for eating by any Jew. It's a different crime. Now the Gemara asks, and let Rabbi Yochanan answer Rabbi Chia bar Abba by saying that it is a case such as where he ate it as an animal with a wound that will cause it to die within 12 months, known as a treifa. In accordance with Rabbi Shimon's opinion, that the legal status of an act of slaughter that is not fit for accomplishing its ritual purpose is not considered an act of slaughter for which the thief must pay the fourfold or fivefold payment, right? Even if you did a mechanically kosher slaughter of an ox, but it turned out that the ox would have died anyway because it had an internal wound, so that animal does not become permitted for eating by a Jew. That's known as a treifa. So the Gemara responds that Rabbi Yochanan holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says that the legal status of an act of slaughter that is not fit for accomplishing its full ritual purpose is nevertheless considered an act of slaughter for the purposes of applying the fourfold or fivefold payment, and so it would apply here. And the Gemara further asks, and let Rabbi Yochanan answer Rabbi Chia bar Abba by saying that the ruling of the Baraisa is stated with regard to an animal removed from its mother's womb after the mother was ritually slaughtered, which is permitted for consumption without slaughter, so that there is a possibility that the thief ate it without first slaughtering it. And the Gemara responds that Rabbi Yochanan holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says that the ben pekua, right, this animal that was in the womb of a female sheep or ox that was slaughtered properly, and it is permissible to eat that fetus without slaughter, since it was part of the mother's body that was properly slaughtered. But Rabbi Meir says, no, the fetus requires slaughter also. Now, that's an interesting ruling because I believe an animal can't be slaughtered until it is at least 8 days old. Now, the Gemara further asks, and let Rabbi Yochanan answer Rabbi Chia bar Abba by saying that it is a case where the bailee stood in judgment in court, and the judges said to him, go out and give him the stolen animal. And he did not do so, and subsequently slaughtered or sold it. So in this case, he would not pay the fourfold or fivefold payment, as does in Rava say, that if the judges instruct the thief, go out and give him the stolen animal, and instead the thief slaughtered or sold it, he is exempt from the fourfold or fivefold payment. And what is the reason? Once the court ruled on his matter, requiring him to give the animal back to the owner, and he did not heed the court's ruling, but rather he slaughtered or sold the animal, he is considered a robber, not a thief. And a robber does not pay the fourfold or fivefold payment. Again, don't think that this guy got away with something, right? The fact that he doesn't take the court's ruling and perform what he was supposed to do, and instead, commits another transgression, means that he's going to carry that sin with him unless he does some whole other atonement process. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. Rava continues, but if the judges say only, you are obligated to give the animal to him, and he did not heed the court's statement, but slaughtered or sold the animal, then he is obligated in the fourfold or fivefold payment. What is the reason? Since the court has not issued a definitive ruling in this matter, but they just advised him, go return it before we pass judgment on you, he is still considered a thief rather than a robber because his crime has not been judged or uprooted and turned into a different crime. And the sages say in response, and according to your reasoning, let Rabbi Yochanan answer Rabbi Hiya bar Abba by saying that the ruling of the Baraisa is stated with regard to a partner who slaughtered an animal stolen by him and his partner without the other partner's knowledge. As the law is in that case, the thief, i.e. the partner who slaughtered the animal, does not pay the fourfold or fivefold payment because he co-owns. Rather, Rabbi Yochanan selected one of 2 or 3 possible answers, but did not mean to say that it was the only possible answer. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we will be together again tomorrow night, Motzi Shabbos. So it's getting a little bit later each week, aiming to get on the air tomorrow night, LA time. 7:30 would be good. 7:40, 7:45 might be more realistic. Looks like only one comment, or question rather. Joseph, are there any mechanisms to help rebuild trust after all these events? Great question. And I think what we've seen before it's the concept of a chazaka, right? So a chazaka, and in the Talmud, there's a machloket, a dispute about how many instances of something are required to establish a legal presumption that it will continue to be this way. Some say 2, some say 3, and the law is 3. So if this one who has become suspected of swearing falsely is somehow given the opportunity to swear, because once he becomes suspected of that, he might not even be given that opportunity. But if he is given that opportunity, and then he swears truthfully on 3 occasions, so then he might have rebuilt the trust in his word. I'm not going to say that's a definitive answer to your question. That's just an impression that I have. And again, it would be dependent on if he really has become thought of as a reputed liar, maybe they just won't even let him swear. So, is there a different mechanism that he can rebuild trust? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it would be, except to say that he has to conduct himself like a righteous person, admit his fault and work long and hard. It would take a long time. I believe, though, that it can happen, right? It can happen. It would just take a long time. Sharon, this is the last one. Mitzvah goreret mitzvah, aveira goreret aveira. The rabbinic statement does seem to apply to the person who further sins to cover up, meaning she's saying that a mitzvah begets another mitzvah and a sin begets another sin. And we also have a similar teaching that heaven helps us in whatever it is that we're trying to do. So if we're trying to live a righteous life, especially if, we're, it's kind of like a Baal Tshuva, right? Somebody who's making an atonement, somebody who lived, a life of transgressions earlier and now wants to overcome that, right? And he wants to rebuild trust, and he wants to live a righteous life, and he wants to get as many, mitzvahs and obligations, and righteous behaviors under his belt. So heaven will assist him in that journey, and people will show up in his path to help him and to give him inspiration and to model good behavior for him and to give him opportunities to show that he's trustworthy. But if a person just wants to feed the evil inclination, his gluttony, his pleasure, his desires for pleasure, his hedonism, well, then heaven will put those opportunities in his path. And that's why it's so important to want the right things and to pray for God to give us the strength and the wisdom to desire the right things. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow night. Motzi Shabbos. Good Shabbos.